Hello, my name is Kathryn Delaney. Welcome to Roots of Alchemy and the very first episode of Conversations with Kat. I'm here tonight mostly just to spell out, I guess, my toolbox as a picnic table of offerings to see how I can support people during this time. Um, and to lend a story that I hope is useful to people and also to share some things that I just learned from tarot cards that I just drew for us all. So my background is pretty varied, you could say, and a timeline is could be complex, and the best way I guess to spell that out is that I have a lot of planets in my third house, right? So if I were to show you my chart, right? Like I'm into astrology, I'm into tarot, I'm into herbalism, aromatherapy, nutrition, flower essences, self-study. Um, I was invited to apprentice with someone for 10 years to learn astrology and the tarot system. And in that period of time, I hand drew 2 tarot decks, which I read with one of them. Um, I also make my own body care products and sell my body care products. I teach about safety in aromatherapy and medicine making and herbalism. I'm a writer, I'm an educator just by nature because I think it's important to share information. And and you could see that if you understood my astrology chart. So and I guess the reason why I bring all this up is that we're interestingly enough going through a really wild transit right now astrologically. And what I mean by that is that there are we were all taught as kids what our solar system looked like, right? And how the order of those planets were and how far away they were, and maybe we were taught about their cycles and what their orbit looked like and their timeline and just to have some kind of astrological understanding of what our universe looked like, right? But we weren't necessarily given the understanding of how much the uh, the alignment of those planets in our actual galaxy, like how much those affected the development of our society and our culture, and because that's all been kind of pushed over here as that's weird stuff and that isn't totally something we can study in mainstream, which I get, right? But we're all being affected by it right now, and we have progressed so much further in time that we can start to reflect back into history and see similarities between different alignments of certain planets that have uh, really long orbits that take a long time to sync up. And we, in January, strangely enough, had a stellium of planets in Capricorn. And so if you could look at this in the galaxy context, from a bird, from an astronomical point of view, if you could look at it from that point of view, you would basically see this circular teeter-totter, I guess, with things of different orbits and different movements, and you would see this huge weight shifted onto one side. And so of course that's going to cause a shift in our universe and in our reality. And that's what we're experiencing right now, is a shift. And what's important about where we're at right now is that we pay attention to where our attention is and where we put our energy, because it's been proven scientifically that where we put our energy can shift the environment around us. So in like 1993, there was for a period of time, like a month and a half period of time from like the beginning of June to like mid-July or maybe the end of July, maybe it was almost 2 months. But it grew from like 800 people to like near 4,000 people. And these people just meditated regularly every single day in Washington, D.C., and it decreased the crime in Washington, D.C. by 23%. And they like did a project and proved this. So it is really important where we put our energy right now, and for us to realize that like what we're creating by where we put our attention is crucial, because honestly, like we wake up every single day and there is, you know, energy that we have to give to different things. And we can like pour our energy into something like a just coals into a fire that can destroy us, or we can pour our energy into something that nourishes us by means of like food and self-care, or something that's inspiring, or something that we can you know uh like feel like we're growing something by, not by means of achievement, but by something that like actually like nourishes like what we feel enlivened by, right? Like we have a choice every single day. And for a really long time, we haven't necessarily felt like we've had that choice. Okay. So, if we look at just what's going on politically, all of those things, like regardless of all of the context of the textures of how people feel about those things, there is something that's happening on a much, much, much bigger scale. And it is literally out out planetarily, and it is affecting us, and it is creating a shift in how we spend our time. Literally, how do we choose to spend our time? What does it cost us, and how does it make us feel, and what can we actually generate out into the universe to help uh, you know, stitch a new thread into this tapestry that we call reality, that it could actually maybe be something that is progressive rather than something that is defeating, and, contradictory to everything that our heart actually resonates with. So, you know, like I don't want to like bite off a whole bunch of your time right now based on like anything that you're interested in or you need to do. Um, but I want to put myself out there as someone who can offer you support. I can offer you support in a lot of different ways. I can show you how to make gluten-free foods and dairy-free foods. I can show you how to make an assortment of different medicines. I can talk about what's going on astrologically. I can, you know, just kind of like show you how I see the world and hope that it inspires a new window into your world, maybe. I don't know. I just want to put myself out there, and I realize that could be for better, for worse. Um, but quite honestly, like we've all gathered so many tools in our lives, right? And I realize that for whatever reason, like I people come to me and tell me that some things that I share are really useful. So I'm trying to share that in a new format and seeing like what do you need? Like how can I support you? Um, and one thing that I want to share about myself right now is that uh, part of my history is that, as I said, like I did an apprenticeship with someone who invited me to draw some tarot cards. So I read with the tarot cards that I hand drew, and I decided to draw some cards, like pull some cards for us tonight, just to kind of see where we're at and where we're going. and hopefully lend a perspective from my window that I see the world right now. So I drew past, present, future reading, and then I drew one more card just for a little bit more clarification. And in the past, it's interesting because all I drew out of the 4 cards that I drew, 3 of them are major arcana, which is all about like a major lesson that we're learning, like a major thing that we're working through, which isn't, I don't want to say it's a bad thing per se. Um, but the first card that we drew is the Emperor, which, is one of the major arcana cards. It's the number 4 of the major arcana, and it's 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 interesting because when we go through life and we ask for help and we ask for things to change, we don't necessarily get to see and choose how we want that help to show up, right? Like we've all been living in this world that we knew was being spun out of control, and we knew that someone needed to pull reins on it. And on one hand, we have like what we're seeing as being control and being reins that are pulled by like man, but we have to realize that like there's something else that's happening, right? Like we needed help to control how industry was kind of destroying the global and environment. Like we needed to uh recalibrate how we live our daily lives so that we actually have more time to share with family. Share, not spend, but share with family. We needed to recalibrate our lives so that we had more time for self-care, and we have more time to like actually consider what we value and what's important to us, because we've been for 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 what it's worth, we've been conditioned to be like really mentally anchored rather than, having this unified system between like our mind and our body and our emotions. We are this, multi-centered integrated being that isn't all mental. And for whatever reason, like at least in America, we've been conditioned to think that like overpowering everything with the mind is what's important and it's what's valued, and yet it's always sacrificed. Like the emotions and the body is always sacrificed for that. Like for whatever this this power that wants to actually like basically profit off of our energy and efforts convinces us is most important, which is like monetary value, right? But hopefully through all of this, we're starting to get a sense of how important it is to actually have value on a different level with one another, aside from like what we can actually monetarily earn. And so, I think in some ways, like, this it's interesting because the Emperor is all about creating order out of chaos. And it's like the window, right, is actually in here. And I just spoke about the window, and how we see the world and what we see is important. And so it's really about how we frame it, right? Like what way do you want to see what's happening right now? And how does it make you feel? And that in of itself is like a thread that is stitching itself into the tapestry of the world that we live in. So ultimately, it comes down to the energy of what we want to put into the world each and every day, especially if we know that, like, this group of 800 to 4,000 people created a shift in freaking the criminal activity in Washington D.C. for in a 2-month period by nearly 25%, right? And we're all right now living in a state of fear. So it's really important and crucial for us to focus our attention, like create order out of chaos and see what's important, at this time. And that comes to the second card, which is the Empress, which is all about what seeds do we want to sow? Like, what do we want to create and manifest and build? And, like, I like have to sometimes navigate which impressions and where I feel it's necessary to speak up and how I speak up in those situations, because I have to consider the seeds that I'm sowing, right? I have to consider, like, do I want to create friction in such a way that it hopefully inspires someone to consider that how they're seeing things? Or, do I want to like stitch in resentment, right? And how do I interact with people, and uh what am I putting out into the world right now? And it's important, right? Because right now we're in spring, and quite literally the seeds that we sow right now could be like determinant of, you know, what what we eat in the future. And I think that's what's important. Do we want to focus on the seeds that other people are sowing, or do we actually want to seed our own harvest? Do we want to actually like put energies into things that we want to come, right? Like, uh, what do we want to grow in ourselves? What do we want to learn how to do? How do we want to interact with people? And how will that manifest in the future? Because ultimately, that's what we are creating for one another. And we have to pay attention to that energy that we're putting out there. And, if we look in the past, there's something that people called like the victory garden. And like in World War II, people planted these gardens so that they would actually, you know, like put less like necessity on importing goods, and like having the means to actually grow food, and like having that sustenance for themselves. And I think it's important for us to look at that in so many different like aspects of life, like not just growing food, but like if you don't know how to grow food and you don't have a plot of land, like start looking into ways that you can grow food in pots. You can grow food in so many different ways. And it's so absolutely satisfying to actually grow your own food. And you have to trust that every year you're going to be learning differently, right? Like nature is really inspiring that way. It shows us what we need to learn. And so, it's important for us right now to sow our seeds. And the first future card that I got was the Four of Pentacles. And you can see this person is kind of like, it's interesting because it to me actually visually represents how a lot of people feel right now, which is that, they're budgeting their resources and they feel like they're kind of like bricked away and kind of um, like walled off from the world. And, so I was like, well, man, that's how we all feel right now. Like in the future, what exactly that's, you know, like I need more clarity. And then I got another major arcana. And then the third major arcana that I got out of the four and major arcana, was the strength card. Oh, it's totally looking backwards, even though I mirrored my thing. So it's the strength card, and the strength card is related to Leo. And it's all about like, where do you invest your heart, right? Like, what carries you through things? What's important to you? What do you look forward to? What inspires you? And that's where it's important to put your anchor, because that's going to guide you through any precipice, right? Like you look at this figure here, and this person has just crossed a mighty bridge, and they're taming their own desire, nature, in a very heartful, anchored, and centered way. And that's, you know, that's where we're going. That's what's important right now. That's what we're evolving to. And that's what the entire universe is aligning to literally like re-anchor us and like transform us all into this like new calibration of our sense of value of self and value of what we make of our lives and what's important. Because like, you know, Saturn right now is shifting from Capricorn, right, which is like all like career focused and you know, life path focused, into Aquarius, which is more of like a focus for the greater good. And you have to consider like how that would affect us all in a global level, considering that we've been, you know, in this kind of like mindset of reality that's conditioned to just like kind of, uh, I mean, that would spin off, right? Like, I mean, countries feed on each other. Like, the United States is like, we get all of our cheap goods from China because, and people are taking advantage there. And that's why we can get all of our cheap goods. And that's how millionaires and billionaires and cajillionaires are made. And right now, for whatever reason, even though everyone's been experiencing a totally different lifestyle all over the world, everyone right now is experiencing this thing that we're all experiencing. And there are so many different things that are going on behind the veil, right? And there's so much that's still unsaid and left to be described and left to be seen. But ultimately, like, what does our future depend on? Our future depends on like where we anchor our heart and what carries us through things and how much we value our connections with one another more than we value how someone else is trying to paint the world. You know, like anchoring ourselves in our heart rather than our head, rather than in our belief systems, but in our actual heart. Like, what does that look like? You know, and it's interesting because Leo is ruled by the heart and it's also ruled by the sun. And the sun, you could say, is the heart of the universe. It's literally like the warmth in what is emitted through the sun like affects and creates seasons in our globe. Like it creates circulation, it creates uh movement and information exchange and all of these different things. And without heart, like, you know, what are we doing? And maybe that's really what it's all about, is like, you know, we've been asking for help for a really long time, and something that's a lot bigger than, you know, a government deciding that we can't use plastic anymore, or, you know, this or that isn't allowed, or, you know, all these things. Like, we're all being recalibrated right now at the same time. And what do we want to do with that? Where do we want to put our anchor? And I think that we should put it in the heart. That's the first episode of Conversations with Kat. I hope you found something out of it resonating for you. And if there's something else that I spoke about that you'd love to learn or to be really helpful for you this time, please let me know. I do a lot of different things. As I said, I can also offer you a tarot and astrology reading. I make products that you can find on Etsy at Rootsofalchemy. I also have an Instagram account that you can see some of my astrologically inspired dream catchers. I also have a WordPress blog that I share some of my other studies on nutrition and aromatherapy education. And I will also be offering a class here soon. So if you'd like to know information on any of those things, or I can support you in any way, please let me know. Blessings to you and much love to you in this time.